Welcome to the Inspiring International Potential podcast. Created by GC International Trade, this podcast aims to fire up businesses in the northwest of England to explore their international growth potential. My name is John Quinton-Barber, and I am the host of this episode. Today we're talking about the chemical sector with my guest, International Trade Advisor Bohdan Ratycz, and Matthew Rollinson, Managing Director at LiCa Scientific Recruitment. But before we start, I'd like to signpost you to the GC International website, where you'll find information about up-and-coming masterclasses. Go to international.growthco.uk/events. Okay, here we go. Welcome, Bohdan. Welcome, Matthew.
Good afternoon, John.
Bohdan, I'm going to turn to you first, Bohdan, because you've got a fascinating job title, International Trade Advisor. If I was a young lad again, clearly that's many moons ago, and I was nipping down to careers office and I saw International Trade Advisor flashing up on the screen, I'd want that job. So, Bohdan, just talk me through what does your job entail, and what do you do during the day, and how does that fit into the chemical industry?
Yeah. Well, you'd be right to want a job like this. It is a fascinating job. But my background, before I talk about the job, is that I've got an honours degree in chemistry. I spent over 30 years in the chemical industry. Started life as a research and development chemist. So I've done all the sort of technical roles that you would need to do in the chemical industry, and then moved on to commercial roles, product manager, sales representative, sales and marketing director, and spent a lot of times exporting, and hence moved into this role. So as an international trade advisor, I would say our prime role is really to help, advise, support, and sometimes we supply funding to chemical companies in the northwest. So basically, I am what's called the chemical lead here in the northwest. So I work with all the big and small chemical companies, but not only people who produce chemicals. We also work with companies who provide services to chemicals. So these are services which tend to be very specialized, sometimes unique, and there are opportunities for these type of service companies in the rest of the world. So our job is to help companies either start exporting, as we'll see in a minute with Matthew, or it's to help people who have got current exports to improve their export profile, and also to increase their growth. And I even work with some of the very, very big multinational companies who need particular problems in particular countries with maybe legislation, registration, which only DIT or the local embassy can help with.
And I mean, before we bring Matthew into the conversation, just to give us an indication of the scale of the sector in the north.
Yeah, I can't tell you. I haven't got figures for the northwest, but certainly the chemical industry is a very broad industry. We're talking about over 35 billion. Last year as a turnover, of which 31 billion was exported. It is actually one fact that nobody knows about. It is the largest exporting manufacturing sector in the UK. People talk about the automotive sector, people talk about aerospace, they get a high profile. Chemicals tend to be forgotten about. And in terms of size, there's over 110,000 people employed in the industry, and it is actually a growing industry after a number of years of a number of changes. And the industry tends to be concentrated in 4 sectors, or 4 clusters as we call them: Runcorn, where I go a lot, the northeast, Hull, and Grangemouth in Scotland.
Wow! So one of them such companies, I'm going to Matthew, LiCa Scientific Recruitment. Give us some background on your company and maybe your journey as well into export. That'd be some nuggets of interest for the listener.
Of course, yeah, thank you. So LiCa Scientific Recruitment's a business that I started after spending about 12 years working in the same industry. And I think it's a story as old as time, really. You know, like a lot of people starting a business, I was working for other people and felt after a while I could do a great job of this, you know, on my own, so to speak. The big catalyst for that actually was my second child arriving, actually. It's why it's called LiCa Scientific Recruitment. My daughters are called Libby and Catherine, and so we just came up with the name. And it's you know, it was just a case of starting a business in my spare bedroom at home. Really, it really was, you know, and just having a go and seeing if I could get a bit of, you know, work-life balance and all the things that go with running your own business. Now, obviously, you know, in terms of strategy, I'd also spotted a gap in the market. Obviously, it wasn't, you know, completely without that. So the gap that I'd spotted was the chemistry sector. As Bohdan says, it's a very vibrant sector, employs a great deal of people, and I also have the benefit of being based in South Manchester, so I'm quite nearby to, you know, a lot of chemistry recruitment activity. Chemistry recruitment is also quite difficult to do in a controlled way, shall we say. You know, well, every company that's making a chemical is typically making something unique. Typically that chemical is going to be made in a particular fashion, requiring particular skills in order to do that. And what my experience over the years had taught me was that, you know, you really can find very direct matches to that from the candidate pool. And so by zeroing in on that market, on just the analytical chemistry, synthesis chemistry, production and formulation chemistry, which are the four main areas that we cover at LiCa Scientific, we really found we were on something. And that was back in 2016 when I started the business, and it started to grow. You know, we got our first clients quite quickly on board. And as things grew on, I was able to establish a small team, move to a more formalized office premises, which is where I'm sitting now. I don't have maps of the world on the wall in the house or anything like that. So I was wondering. Yeah. So that's it.
What a great journey. And, you know, 4 years ago, that's a short space of time. So you should be congratulated, you know, first of all, for the entrepreneurial and spirit and setting the business up, Matthew, but then to internationalize and to do it with gusto, I believe, and the plans and the vision. So absolutely fantastic. And I suppose, Bo, this is where you come in and your experience and your advice and your support for companies like Matthew, because, you know, we're sat here today, and what you can't see as you're listening to this, I can see, is that Bohdan is sat in front of his bookcase, which indicates to me he's extremely cerebral, experienced, and has a lot of intellect in the area of internationalization and chemistry, chemical industry. But that side, just, you know, what do you offer to a company like Matthew's?
As you see it, I think the difference, what I noticed immediately with Matthew is, being on a serious point, is that he listens. Matthew is a good listener, and he's a good evaluator, and he is the eternal optimist. So I could see that with the advice, the services that we provide, he was putting his mind into focus about how to get exports. And we had the opportunity in 2018, I think it was May, where there was a chemical exhibition in Cologne called ChemSpec. And I invited Matthew to come along, and Matthew went, and immediately he was out there talking to people. And one of the things that I remember his comments was that he came back with, that people are interested in my services. And what he's got something unique, and that's important for exporters, that you can take a service and you can offer it into other parts of the world, and people were interested in what Matthew had to offer, and I think he came back enthused, and then he went on the second ChemSpec the following year, 2019, and that's, I believe, where he got his first export order. But he went as an exhibitor for the second in 2019, and he got a TAP grant, which is a small grant towards the cost of the exhibition that the TIT offer. And I know he spoke to experts in Belgium about problems that he had out there. So there is that sort of local help to companies around the world that companies can quite easily tap into, as well as the International Trade Advisor. There are a number of what we call commercial officers who are ready to help. And also on the stand, whilst he was at ChemSpec, he had the opportunity to talk to other people from DIT and gets that sort of wider experience.
What we've heard there is Bohdan articulating the offer of support. You just talk me through what it's felt like to get that support. You know, that grant, for example, to exhibit, which we know exhibiting is not cheap. That opportunity that you've taken and how that's helped your business.
Well, it's helped the business in several ways. I mean, you know, looking beyond the immediately obvious commercial, you know, winning clients, doing business, obviously the image that I think it portrays as well of our company and the way that we see ourselves, really. You know, I think, you know, any small company is just a big company in waiting, isn't it? At the end of the day, you know, every company started somewhere, and we've got ambitions to obviously be more than we are. And I think what meetings with people like Bohdan and exhibitions and places do is they allow you to become more than just the sum of your parts. So while Bohdan quite rightly says, you know, like I suppose like a lot of small businesses, you do think about things like your image, you know, and the, you know, office space and all of that kind of thing, you know, all forms part of that image. But once you kind of go to speak to organisations in forums like what the DIT has provided us with, none of that stuff matters. You know, nobody cares about anything apart from how well can you do this job that I want you to do. And the best thing about chemistry that I've always felt is chemistry wherever you go in the world. In fact, chemistry in terms of the language of chemistry it's the same all over the place. It is what it is, you know. And so therefore there is that ability to take a job that you can do very, very well in the UK and to apply that into other markets wherever they are. And I don't know, I can't think of too many businesses where that wouldn't necessarily apply to them either, you know, because, you know, at the end of the day, there's customers everywhere, I suppose. So, you know, in regards to the, you know, the assistance that we'd received for getting overseas conferences, things like the grants and things such as that, it kind of gave us that a bit more faith as well, that, look, if an organisation like the Department for International Trade is prepared to help us out with some of the costs of doing this, then obviously they've got a bit of faith in what we're doing. You know, we're not out of our minds with this, you know, we're not kind of thinking, you know, ideas that aren't going to go anywhere. And that it just added to that sort of momentum of, okay, you know, how do we position ourselves so that we can take this service that we do very, very well, we know applies to companies, you know, we know they need it, we know we're very, very good at it, and how do we put ourselves in that position? And the conferences were a great way of doing that. It's an absolutely fantastic way of doing that. And I think going back and exhibiting was probably the biggest step, because, you know, that turned what was a few £100s of investment on our part into several thousands of pounds of investment on our part to, you know, to do that. And that was a big call, but without doing that, we wouldn't have won the client that we did. I'm confident of that, because we were able to have more of a formal meeting situation with the company where, you know, as much as these conferences, that they're all good fun, we're all giving out business cards and everything like that, companies want to sit down and talk business. You know, you need to have some kind of presence there that goes beyond, I think, you know, just walking around. I think, you know, having that stand, having that presence really puts on a great pedestal. And we were able to, as I say, win business with a company. It's based all over Europe, but the office that we worked with was in Brussels. And that was one of 12 orders that they gave us throughout, you know, from, I think, August to the time that COVID started. We were still working with them on things, you know, and it was the catalyst. It really was that got all that going. And now we're known by that company for the service we give them. And that's where it's going to grow from. You know, it's going to be just doing a job that we do really well.
That's fantastic to hear, Matthew. And let's not forget, it's only been a couple of years as well. You know, it's not happened over a long period of time. You've accessed that for the last couple of years. So for any business that's listening right now, in the chemical industry that wants to export or tap into the international market, I'm hearing here, you definitely recommend picking up the phone to Bohdan or picking up the phone to IT and getting involved. So that's you are a real example of how this works, and this is absolutely the reason why we're broadcasting this podcast, to get people to think about internationalization and trading and support that's available. But when I think about the chemical industry, I think about regulation, I think about red tape, I think about a lot of absolute health and safety rules. And then you couple that with internationalization or international market, I think of more red tape, more regulation, more instruction. So talk us through a little bit, because that's clearly going to be what I imagine one of the things that you deal with day in, day out, and talk us through how that works and some of the support they can give in that area.
I think, that's a very good point, John, and it's something that can't be overlooked. But I think what you've got to do is look at the chemical industry and look at the people who work there, and they're very disciplined people. So you can't have a slapdash approach towards chemicals. Chemicals are safe, but they have to be handled in the right manner. And as long as you handle them in the right manner and treat them safely, then absolutely fine. So that's where the regulations come in. There is a problem though around the world, because countries do tend to bring in their own regulations.
Yeah.
The EU will have one set of regulations, but India will have another set of regulations. They may be easier, they may be more difficult, there may be more strands to it. And that is very, very important for chemical companies, but it's also important for any company with any products or service, whereby you need to know what those regulations are in those sort of countries and what the cost of registration is. So, because if you don't, if you do not have that regulation and you do not meet those regulations, then your product will be stopped at the customs, and you won't be able to deliver it to your final customer. So we help with people with that. So I'll give you an example. India is bringing in new regulations on chemicals. We're involved in some of the really big chemical companies. We've had a meeting with DIT, and we're going to institute meetings with the lawmakers in India, because what we want to do is to make sure that the regulations that come into India will make it acceptable for chemical companies in the UK to supply India. So that's something that private industry can't do. I'm from private industry. I know that I would never have had access to a government official in India or in any other country. But as the local people and as part of DIT, we have got that route and that say so. And I think in Matthew's case, didn't you have a case in Belgium where you got advice on local regulations?
I did, yes, we did. We were in the middle of organising our somebody to have a job offer, and we were looking into completely unrelated to. We were looking into another client that we were going to support in, I think it was in Basel, in Switzerland, and one of my colleagues said, "Oh, I've just discovered we need a license to work to do this piece of work in this town," and we looked into it, and we were right, we did. So we looked into applying for that, and then somebody, I don't remember who it was, asked the question: "Do we need a license for what we're doing now?" Because it hadn't occurred to us. Belgium's in the EU and all sorts of other things. But as it turned out, we did need a license. Now, this was a bit difficult because we were in the middle of doing that piece of business at the same time. So it was a little bit of an awkward conversation where I remember it really well, because one of the benefits of working where I work is we've got a gym on the ground floor here. And I'd gone for a workout at the gym, and somebody rang me up from the Belgian support office that Bohdan's just referred to. And I took the call and I said, "I've got this problem. I'm in the middle of doing a deal, and I've just discovered that I think I need a license to work in this town. I've done some research on the internet." And he said, "Are you working in one part of Belgium or another?" And I told him the part of Belgium I was working in. And he goes, "Yes, you need a license there." And I don't think I'd have needed one for the other part of town. It was a weird system. I think it's a bit like if you wanted to go and do some busking on the London Underground, you'd have to get permission off somebody. So we had to get permission off somebody. So I contacted the person in Belgium, in Brussels. He, on my behalf, got in touch with the local council who run the local economic licensing, the articulator, and that person was so supportive. And I've got to say, this is a good story for anybody who's got a concern about, I mean, the image of a Brussels bureaucrat, right? I mean, that is not an image that fills most people's heart with, this is going to go great. We're going to work with a bureaucrat in Brussels. But do you know what? By the end of that process, I was largely communicating with this guy with emojis, with you got this wrong, you got that wrong. We were having a bit of a laugh with each other because Bo doesn't know this, but since I started working with the DIT, I don't know if I told you, I've been learning German. So I was a little bit confident with, okay, I can, if he offers me a language, I'll say German. And he says, we send these forms out. You've got a choice of languages. And that was fantastic. And he goes, coming in French or Dutch. Now, I don't know why I picked Dutch, because I've never spoken a word of Dutch in my life, but for some reason, some part of my brain went Dutch. So anyway, so I'm working through these forms and I'm filling in the parts and we're using Google Translate and all those kinds of things. And it was quite hacky, I will give it that. But you know what? We were able to get through the process, and that's the main thing, is we encountered a problem. Did it look pretty? Was it flowing? Was it this nice mellifluous process? No, it wasn't. But we got through the issue because, one, the DIT helps us understand, yes, you have got a problem actually. You need to get a license in order to do the commercial activity you want to do. Here's who you speak with. That person was helpful. That person, gave us the benefit of the doubt over the fact that we had actually started, kind of the process of doing some work, which I don't know if we were meant to necessarily have done that without asking first. And we got to the conclusion we were sorted, and that's something that when I look at problems in business, I always kind of think, well, it doesn't have to be a problem. This, if you're faced with an issue, it's a chance to learn something. In my case, it was a chance to learn some Dutch, which when would I have ever done that? So, but it meant that we learned how to do something. And now, next time we're working with, a client in another part of the world, we're going to have that experience of having gone through that. So if we face that again, if we have to apply for a license in a different language, or whatever it will be, we've been there already, and it's just kind of one of those bits of experience that, you just can't kind of carry with you. And, it's good.
That's right. I think we've all got the image now of you on a treadmill texting a smiley emoji to a Belgian. Not to simplify the process, but if it could be as simple as that.
You can just put it down to that, actually. That's fine. Yeah.
A great example there of moving into new markets, which is international, and then looking at some, finding yourself trapped maybe potentially by some of the local regulations. And Bohdan, thank you for sharing your knowledge on that, because I think it's great for the listener to hear, because there is going to be regulation, absolutely, but it doesn't have to be problematic. You can get through it and you can push through it. You're listening to the Inspiring International Potential podcast, and we're talking about the chemical sector and how to trade internationally. So, Bohdan, just finally, I'm going to wrap up now, because this has gone extremely quickly, which is great. The subject.
What's the next episode, John?
The subject of the chemical industry and internationalisation has, it's flown by, and it has, because you've given some great insights, some great examples, Matthew, and your story is fantastic about overcoming some of the challenges and trading internationally. And Bohdan, you've given some great insight into how businesses can trade internationally in the chemical industry. And what I want from you both now is your last bits of advice. So if anyone listening and they want to get started, what would be your key advice to them? What would be your key advice? And go to you, Bohdan, first.
I think the first thing and the prime thing, and I know that Matthew did this, but I didn't really touch a lot on it, is do your market research. When you look at a country or you look at a sector or whatever you're doing, and whether it's services, products, do the research. Is that market for you? who's operating in it, how does it tick, how does it work. So do that. It's critical, because the information could be negative, but that's good as well, because it may not be for you, that particular market. So you don't waste a lot of time and money. The second bit of advice is do engage with an international trade advisor. They're all free. They're all very experienced. It's a great team that we have here in the Northwest and across the country and across the world. They're all ready to give you advice. They're all ready to help. If they can't help, they'll be honest with you, and they'll signpost you to somebody who can help. So, for instance, if you need a solicitor in South Korea, we can point you to half a dozen good solicitors, or you need a hotel in Sao Paulo, where, the DID is ready to step in. All this is free and available advice. Do consider also, when you're doing your research, markets and countries. So if you're a new exporter, don't go to a difficult market like China. Maybe start closer to home with Ireland or the Netherlands or Belgium, as Matthew has done, and so take what we call the easier countries, the low-lying countries first, get that experience under your belt, and then maybe take a more difficult country or more market. So that would be in terms of steps. I would also suggest, if people have got products and they want to and they have difficulties with the language, the delivery, the market research, maybe find yourself a partner. Now, it could be an agent who somebody works on your behalf, or it could be what we call a distributor, somebody who will buy your product and then resell it in that particular market. And you can work with them. And a lot of companies, even very, very big companies, use distribution as a way of getting into the market. And finally, coming back to your point, John, about regulations, check the local regulations. Know what's needed. Not only about registration, but it might be about labeling. It might be about the language that you need out there. Even simple things like instruction manuals with your piece of kit or with your chemical. Because if you don't, and especially in places like the US, the liability is quite serious and can come back and to bite you. So it's a question of knowing what not to do as well as knowing what to do is critical.
Bohdan, that is fantastic advice you've given, some real nuggets there, and some for listeners listening in, there's a lot of information there for people to take in and to digest and to hopefully use. So thank you for that, Matthew. And to use your phrase, which I love, if there's any small company that's the small company that's going to be a big company in the making that's out there now that's listening, what's your tips? What's your top tips?
I think it's to have that faith in what it is that you're already doing very well for customers, and try and listen to that market and what it's feeding back to you by virtue of, are you trading well? Are you doing something that people value, that they tell you is good? And have that confidence that it doesn't really matter what country that person's necessarily in. They're going to value that about it if they've got the same nature of requirements, which in our industry, stretches, wherever, people need chemists all over the world. So I think it's just having that faith that, if you do something well in the UK, then somebody in Spain, France, Italy, wherever is going to look at you and think you do it very well for us too.
Thank you very much, Matthew. You've been listening to the Inspiring International Potential podcast. If you're interested in finding out more about the chemical sector, we have a handy guide on the subject we can send you. Simply email marketing@tradenw.org or visit international.growth.co.uk to download it. Watch out for our other episodes in this series where we're talking about the healthcare sector, SEO for use internationally, and market opportunities in places like India and the Middle East. And finally, my thanks go to Bohdan and to Matthew for being so generous with your time and your help and support, if anyone who's listening, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.